Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my podcast. As always, I'd like to start off the show by saying that if you do like this show, please feel free to rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Please subscribe. It'd mean the world to me. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. So for today's topic, we're going to be talking about Twitter feminism, specifically the Katie Rolphe piece from this month's edition of Harper's magazine. Now, this is a piece that I was really excited to review. Basically, let me give you the backstory on this piece because it's kind of a whole snowball effect here. I first became aware of this piece about mid-January when Twitter feminism found out that this piece was being written and went completely sideways on Rolphe. Basically, what the whole thing was that somebody had said that Katie Rolphe had planned in this piece to out the writer of the Shitty Media Men list, which turned out to be ultimately not the case. She's not named in this piece at all. But basically, the whole thing started getting really ridiculous because at that point, this piece wasn't even finished being written yet. So basically, pure speculation. Nobody had even read the piece because it wasn't finished. It wasn't finished being written. So basically, feminist Twitter went completely sideways on her, called her every name in the book. Some people were actually offering writers money to pull their pieces from this edition of Harper's, basically in order to try to sink this whole piece. And what Harper's did, actually, is not only did they not pull this piece, they actually made it the cover story for the March edition. So, congratulations to Harper's for that. I appreciate them not caving. So let's go ahead and get into this piece. If you hear page flipping in the background, please forgive. Harper's is a paywall site, so I am actually reading this from the paper copy of the March edition of the Harper's magazine. So if you hear background noise, I'll try to edit it out as much as possible, but forgive. All right. So I think the first paragraph in this piece really sums up the main problem that is kind of facing the Me Too movement and Twitter feminism today. No one would talk to me for this piece. Or rather, more than 20 women talked to me, sometimes for hours at a time, but only after I promised to leave out their names and give them what I began to call deep anonymity. This was strange because what they were saying did not seem that extreme. Yet here in my living room, at coffee shops, in my inbox and on my voicemail, were otherwise outspoken female novelists, editors, writers, real estate agents, professors, and journalists of various ages, so afraid of appearing politically insensitive that they didn't want to put their names to their thoughts, and I couldn't blame them. Now, I'm sure it's no surprise to anybody listening to this, but obviously, if you say or do the quote-unquote wrong thing on social media these days, people will come down on you like a ton of bricks, which is exactly what happened to Katie when Twitter feminists decided that she was now persona non grata and needed to be dragged through the Twitter sphere. Jessica Valenti actually called the prospect of her outing Moira Donegan, who is the originator of the Shitty Men in Media list. She called the prospect profoundly shitty and incredibly dangerous, all the while ignoring the fact, I guess, that the existence of the Shitty Men in Media list was profoundly shitty and inherently dangerous. Anyway, here are some of the statements that are apparently so incendiary that these women were afraid to actually put their names to them. I think believe all women is silly. Women are unreliable narrators also. I understand how hard it is to come forward, but I just don't buy it. It's a sentimental view of women. I think there is more regretted consent than anyone is willing to say out loud. What seems truly dangerous to me is the complete disregard that the movement shows for a sacred principle of the American criminal justice system, the presumption of innocence. I come from Mexico, whose judicial system relied until 2016 on the presumption of guilt, which translated into people spending decades, sometimes lifetimes, in jail without even seeing a judge. I have never felt sexually harassed. I said this to someone the other day, and she said, "I am sure you are wrong." I think the Me Too movement is a potentially valuable tool that is degraded when women appropriate it to encompass things like creepy DMs or weird lunch dates. And I do not think touching a woman's back justifies a front page in the New York Times and the total annihilation of someone's career. Ooh, that's some barn burner stuff there, man. That's incendiary shit. Wow. But this is where we're at now, that these statements, which all seem perfectly logical, reasonable statements, are apparently as such that these women cannot put their names to them for fear of being professionally and personally dragged on the internet. And hopefully none of you have ever been the victim of a Twitter mob, but I'm sure we've all seen Twitter mobs happen. And you see the damage that can be done to one's professional life, one's personal life. So yeah, it is a valid fear, which is a problem. We are creating an environment where women cannot stand up and voice their opinions because it goes against the conventional thinking on this. That's pretty fucked up. And to think that you can't even say something as benign as these statements without having to worry about your personal and professional life being ruined is a serious problem. Rolphe goes on to say in the piece, Twitter, especially, has energized the angry extremes of feminism in the same way it has energized Trump and his supporters. The loudest, angriest, most simplifying voices are elevated and rendered normal or mainstream. There's something very weird about the similarities between this third wave, fourth wave feminism, and I won't even say Trump supporters, but I'd say the guys in the alt-right. Between both of these movements, there's this really weird, really dark, like you can't even call it angry, it's almost like blind rage that both groups of people are looking for somebody to vent that out to. And it occurred to me while I was thinking about this, and I was actually thinking about the alt-right and Jordan Peterson, that for these women, Twitter feminism, this third wave, fourth wave feminism, is for them what the alt-right is for the men that join the alt-right. You seem to be incredibly angry about something that you either can't or won't define, and you're looking for a group of people to accept you and give you an outlet for that anger, instead of trying to figure out what you're actually angry about and working on that. Another quote from Rolphe from her piece, the need to differentiate between smaller offenses and assault is not interesting to a certain breed of Twitter feminists. It makes them impatient, suspicious. The deeper the attitude towards due process is, don't bother me with trifles. Which, first off, you can't argue with that. These people apparently do not care about due process. They're willing to drag anybody for anything at any time. And this hits at something I think that is a little deeper going on in this wave of feminism, which is that you're not looking for equality, you're looking for superiority. If you're fine with denying somebody their constitutional right to due process based on their genitalia, you are inherently, completely, categorically wrong. You do not stand for equality. What you want is some kind of stratification of society where men aren't even second-rate citizens, you're third-rate citizens at that point. You're not even afforded your basic rights to due process. On what level is that equality? There's no equality there. So every time one of these feminists says that they want equality between the sexes, no, you don't. What you want is superiority over men. And the kicker is, instead of being called out for this, there are people that will actually run interference for this and somehow try to defend it. Some of the examples that Rolphe has from the piece here that I'll read to you. The Guardian described the list, as in the shitty media men list, as an attempt to take control of the narrative by speaking out. First off, speaking anonymously is not speaking out. That's not what you were trying to do. If you were trying to speak out, you would put your name and your face to your accusations. That way your accuser can know who you are, what he's being accused of, and could actually defend himself. The Washington Post said the point was community. No, the point was not community. It's an anonymously sourced spreadsheet of men who allegedly did something. It wasn't a forum. Nobody put their name to anything. It wasn't a community. It's basically just a slam piece. It's a place for women to just go, vent whatever, completely anonymously, non-vetted. That's not a community. According to the Owl, a few false positives is probably an acceptable price. Not when the stakes are this high. Not when accusations get you fired, get your career trashed, can get your marriage ruined. There is no room for false positives here. Especially not for the Me Too moment, because the first time that somebody can prove a false positive, this whole thing goes to shit. Everything that you've done gets called into question. Everything that you will do gets called into question. It's like whenever you find out that a lab has had tainted samples, all of a sudden everything that's ever gone through that lab is tainted. Everything gets thrown out. So the first time you get a false positive on this, everything that's been accomplished goes in the shitter. Mashable opined, maybe the women accessing it will see a name and feel a little less crazy, a little more validated in knowing that the weird interaction they had with that media guy in a bar was in fact creepy. You can't figure out if something was creepy or not all by yourself. You need to go look at some anonymous list to see if your feelings are valid. What the fuck are you, 5? You can't figure this out on your own? Really? Are we that broken that you can't figure out if something was creepy or not? Or if it just made you uncomfortable? Or maybe you're just overreacting? Oh, and by the way, here are some of the offenses that were on these shitty media men list that might fall under creepy, or rapey, or sexual assault. Creepy DMs, weird lunch dates, leering, flirting, violent language, and leading multiple women online. That's not assault in any way, shape, or form. That's things that you can easily just delete and keep moving with your life. That's not something to ruin somebody's life over. And if this is where we're at, that there is a group of women that feel like they have the right to destroy somebody's life over a DM, or the fact that you got a weird vibe off of a dude, really says something about what this wave of feminism is trying to accomplish. Another example Rolphe gives about how far this has gone. She cites a story from The Cut, basically describing one woman's sexual assault Me Too story of how one time she was at a party and somebody in the literary world got a little too drunk, sat too close to her in a cab, and asked for her phone number. And somehow now this constitutes assault. Asking somebody for their phone number and perhaps being a little bit awkward and a little bit too forward is now on par with rape. She finishes up that particular paragraph with this sentence. It begins to feel as if the end game of this project is not bringing to account powerful sexual bullies, but, as a male acquaintance puts it, the presumptive criminalization of all male sexual initiatives. Ding, ding, ding! You figured it out! The menfolk are catching on to you, ladies. In fact, I'll go one further than this guy. It's not that women don't want men to come on to them anymore. It's that they want men gone. They want you out of their sphere of existence. Go delete yourself. Go put yourself somewhere else. Just get the fuck out. If you don't believe me, let's go a little further. We got some pull quotes here from some different Twitters that Katie cites here. Kristen Phillips, a spirited young writer about the publishing world, quote, "It's not a revolution until we get the men to stop pitching, LAMO." In the outline, a new digital publication, Leah Finnegan writes, "Many men wonder what to do with their entitled mouths and brains at this moment like this, and the answer is, shut up and go away." She also tweeted, "Small practical step to limit sexual harassment. Have Obamacare cover castration." This is where we're at. They don't want you to just be quiet. They just want you gone. Just get out. No more men. Bye. Now, I would have less of a problem with this if feminists just came forward and said that that's what they want, but you keep saying that you want equality between the sexes, but you clearly don't. Because saying things like men need to go sit down and shut up, or men need to stop pitching, or men need to stop talking to me, or looking at me, or trying to associate with me in any way, shape, or form is not equality. Banishing men does not make you equal to men. Again, it puts men down to being third-rate citizens that are going to go live, I don't know, in a gulag somewhere, where I guess we'll just bring them out whenever we need them to do what the fuck ever you're going to need them to do in your new utopian woman order. But in my opinion, there's a deeper subtext here. And I'm going to go back to Rolphe's piece and pull out a quote that she actually has in here from Joan Diridon. In her prescient early 70s critique of the women's movement, Joan Diridon wrote, "Increasingly it seemed that the aversion was to adult sexual life itself. How much cleaner to say children forever." She went on to object to a feminist idea of sex that assumed women were, in her memorable phrase, "wounded birds." Okay, first off, Joan with the mic drop, because you just nailed it. I think the bigger issue here is that these women are scared of their femininity to the point where they just want to deny that it exists. Like, you're so afraid of your own sexuality that instead of coming to grips with that, you just want to banish men so that you don't ever have to think about it or deal with it. And then you can just stay this pure childlike thing for forever. And you never have to concern yourself with sex, which, granted, it's messy, it's personal, it'll get sideways on you real quick. It's one of the most adult things you can do, and there's a lot that goes along with it. That if you are not ready to take responsibility for yourself as an adult, if you're not ready for the concept of self-ownership, you're not going to be ready for the concept of having an actual adult sexual relationship. So I think that's where this is kind of going off the rails. And I see it a lot. It stuck out a lot to me when I read the cat person piece, and then when I read the Aziz Ansari piece, that both of these women described their sexual experiences as if they were just there, like you were present in the room, but you weren't an active participant, which even on a logistical level, I'm just like, how? What were we just like sitting there like a starfish? But moreover that, it's, if you're not participating, then you kind of get to maintain that kind of hands off, I am a victim, this was something that was done to me because I allowed it to be done to me, instead of being an active participant. Because once you're an active participant, you can't really claim that victimhood status anymore. At that point, you have to admit that you are a willing participant, and you forego all of that poor me, patriarchy, I'm a victim of men, I was just there, and all this was done to my person, and I have no agency, and therefore have to take no responsibility. But honestly, I think that's really the root problem, and all of the rest of this are symptoms. So until we can get to a point where these women are willing to address the root problem, I don't see this situation getting any better, because it seems like the tactic they've decided to take is, instead of actually trying to learn how to be an adult female and how to move in the world as an adult female, you want to stay a child and have other people still take care of you. But at the same time, you want to kind of be an adult, but not all the way be an adult. And it doesn't work that way. It's either you're all the way in or you're all the way out. Moving on a little bit. There's another quote in here from Rolphe that I kind of want to use to segue into another topic that's kind of a part of this online feminism thing. And that's this. The rage can at times feel like bloodlust. This is how I want to kind of segue into talking about that Aziz Ansari piece. I will thoroughly admit I am part of the problem. I read the whole thing front to back, trying to find the sexual assault that did not exist. But I think we can all agree that that piece was revenge porn. It was a hit piece. There was no reason for it to be written. There was no reason for it to be published. It was put out there solely to drag a dude for nothing. He did nothing wrong. And that's really where this bloodlust is coming in. It's almost got this feeling like, now that you've taken down some people that really genuinely needed to be taken down, like the whole Harvey Weinstein thing did need to come out. A lot of other these things need to come out. But now that you've got that taste in your mouth, now you're just like kind of roaming the landscape looking for dudes to attack and take down, which is not going to help the Me Too movement at all. Like I said before, you really need to be careful of false positives. And you also really need to be careful of keeping your focus on those men who genuinely deserve to be outed. And once you drag in stuff like this, like the shitty media men list, the Aziz Ansari thing, you start diluting your cause, because people start looking at this as, okay, are you really genuinely trying to affect social change, or are you just trying to promote a vendetta against certain people that did things to you that aren't sexual assault, but just you didn't like it. So now you're going to lump it in this, and you're going to put him in there, and it's just going to make everybody else look bad. And more to that point, Rolphe writes, it feels as if the feminist movement is, at times, providing cover for vindictiveness and personal vendettas and office politics and garden variety disappointment that what we think of as purely positive social change is also, for some, blood sport. And I have to agree with that. Like everything I just said, I feel like a lot of this is starting to devolve into something that it was not meant to be. Basically, it's blood sport. You're just looking to take men down because you're very, very angry at them for some reason that you don't really want to face or look inside yourself and figure out why you're so angry. So you're just going to project it out and you're just going to attack people who may or may not even deserve it. Another interesting Rolphe quote from this. In some ways, if we take the imaginative leap, the world Twitter feminists are envisioning, scrubbed clean of anyone hitting on anybody, asking for phone numbers, leaning over to kiss somebody without seeking verbal permission, seems not that substantively far away from the world of Mike Pence saying he will never eat alone with a woman who is not his wife. This odd convergence reveals something critical about the moment, the complicated ways in which we may be snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Now, if your ultimate goal is equality of the sexes and integration, then yes, you are fighting against your own cause when you do this. But if what it is you genuinely want is a separation of the sexes, you do want this separation of you can't speak to me, you can't talk to me, you can't look at me, you can't work with me, you can't do anything with me, then yeah, you're coming really close to like creepy Mike Pence. I need to have my wife with me wherever I go, especially if there's other women because reasons territory. To start wrapping this up, I'm going to read another one of Rolphe's quotes. If we are going through a true reckoning, there should be space for more authentically diverging points of view, a full range of feelings, space in which to hash out what is and is not sexual misconduct, which is an important and genuinely confusing question about which reasonable people can and will disagree. And I agree with this, but where it seems to be at right now is if you even attempt to open that conversation, you get savaged. So I can understand why nobody really wants to take that first step and put themselves out there because the danger is so great. I mean, you get ripped apart online and that's not for everybody. Not everybody has the strength to handle that or to walk away from it. And some people do take it very personally. So it is a conversation that needs to be had, but also kind of a secondary problem with that is having a conversation about what is and is not sexual harassment, what is and is not sexual assault, involves having a conversation about sex, which again, if you are somebody who is avoiding trying to have any kind of responsibility for your sexuality, that's not a conversation that you're trying to have. Because that means, again, you would have to be an active participant in this conversation and start defining what it is you do and do not want, which would be an adult thing to do, not a childlike thing to do. And then again, once you step into that adult realm, you don't get to play the victim card anymore. To finish up the piece, Rolphe writes, there is, of course, sexism, which looms and shadows us in all kinds of complicated and unmappable ways. But is that the totalitarian force, the central organizing narrative of our lives? There is whether this moment veers from important and exhilarating correction into implausibility and rationalization. One of the deeply anonymous says, this seems like such a boring way to look at your life. And honestly, if you're going to reduce yourself to being that one-dimensional, that, again, nothing is ever your fault. Everything happens to you. Everybody's against you. It's the patriarchy. It's this, it's that, it's whatever. It's never your own personal failings, which we all have personal failings. We're not all always successful. And the reason, well, not the reason, but the thing that you need to do when that happens is to look inside yourself and figure out where it is you failed so that you don't make that same failure again. When you keep blaming people outside of yourself, you're never going to get to that realization, so you're going to keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. Also, allowing sexism to define you is really, really stupid and reductive. You're more than that. You're more than what other people think of you. You're a much more complex individual than that. Please don't take yourself to like this two-dimensional, I'm just this victim of everything and everybody, and it's just so sad, and I'm going to go hide in my safe space. That's no way to live. That's not being an adult. That's being a child. So stop being childish. Grow up. Have a mature conversation about this, because this is something that needs to be talked about. I'm not totally against the Me Too movement. I do think it has a certain purpose, especially now in this day and age where we're finally sitting down and kind of starting to have this conversation about men and women working together in the workplace. What is appropriate? What isn't appropriate? How do we interact with one another? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? These are conversations to be had so that we can all move forward. But if you're not mature enough to listen to someone else's point of view and just shut people down, then you're never going to progress. So on that point, I'm going to wrap this up. I just want to go ahead and remind you again, if you do like this podcast, I am on iTunes, I'm on Google Play, and I'm on Stitcher. Please go rate, comment, subscribe. Take care. Until next time.